The Beatles' second film was supposed to be called Eight Arms to Hold You when production was 7 weeks into it, but neither John nor Paul fancied writing a song to fit this octopodous concept, and in the end, director Richard Lesser, perhaps acknowledging the slapdash and directionless tone of the project, decided on Help. John knew very well that when he and Paul were asked to write the title song to their second feature film, it would very likely become their next #1 hit single, as did A Hard Day's Night the year before. They could very well have written another innocent pop standard, the likes of which they could churn out at any given moment. Instead, John chose to put the most revealing and personal inner feelings he had ever put into a song. With Paul's help, he let the world know what it was like to be Beatle John Lennon.
I was grossly overweight and needed help, and only one critic reviewer ever spotted it, and it was Al Aronowitz. And he wrote it in the New York Post or wherever he was writing. He said, Johnny, or whatever he was from, is crying out for help. And I didn't realize that I was at the time. I was just writing a song for I've been commissioned to write a song for the movie. And I came out with Help. And Al Aronowitz review of it said he's crying for help. I was crying for help. It was like, that was the Fat Elvis period. You see the movie, he's very fat, very insecure, and completely lost of self. And I'm singing about when I was younger and all the rest of it. Now the positive thing is, yes, I'm very positive. I also go through deep depressions where I'd like to jump out the window, But so the pendulum swings amazingly, and I'm an amazingly emotional person. It's becoming easier to deal with as I get older, and I try. I don't know whether control is the right word, or I've grown up a little, or you calm down a little. But the swings in emotion from ecstatic highs to suicidal depressions are actually physically and mentally wearing, and I've always had it all my life. And it's just what I'm stuck with.
The song was actually written long before the film came out. We wrote it in my house at Kenwood, John said shortly after the song was released. I had a little bit of a song, which I'd played around at writing, called something like Keep Your Hands Off My Babe. Anyway, it was floating around for a long time, and when Paul came over, we decided to sort of adapt it. We wrote Help after we had been told of the film's title. We never write to fit in with the storyline, but this one seemed to fit okay. That's what I was there for, to complete it, Paul says. Had John just been left on his own, he might have taken weeks to do it, but just one visit and we would go right in and complete it. Director Richard Lesser shares, when the second film was being prepared under the imaginative working title Beatles 2, the writers and I wanted to call it Help. Unfortunately, we were informed by copyright lawyers that someone else had registered the title. Ringo, helpfully, offered 8 Arms to Hold You. Needless to say, there wasn't a huge amount of enthusiasm to write that song. Another desperate phone call to the lawyers resulted in the question, does the title have an exclamation part in it? We said, if it helps, we can have one. Since the other title didn't, we were in the clear. Lesser continues, that afternoon, John and Paul borrowed the studio piano and started work. John, years later, often said that Help was a very personal and emotional song for him, all thanks to an exclamation mark. John acknowledged one more source of inspiration for the song's composition.
I remember Maureen Cleaver, a writer, the one who did the famous Jesus story in the Evening Standard, she said to me, why don't you ever write songs with more than one syllable in the word? So I wrote, in Help, there's 2 or 3 syllable words, and I very proudly showed it to her, and she didn't like them. And when I was insecure and things like that, she said, everything you write always has 1 or 2 syllables. It's like Kenneth Alsop. So I never considered it before.
Right.
So after that, I put a few words with 3 syllables in, but she didn't think much of them when I played it to her anyway.
The track started out slower, but was somewhat sped up during recording to make it sound more commercial. John would later regret this for hurting his original concept for the track, but the Beatles needed a hit, and their summarization of his initial ideas was on par with the equally effective work on She Loves You and Please Please Me. Actually, The emotion in the author's voice is what gives Help its sincerity. John remembered this song in 1980 as a cry for help, coming from the depths of what he dubbed his Fat Elvis period. After touring and recording non-stop for 2 years, he was mentally worn out and felt alone in his multi-roomed house in the stockbroker district in London's western suburbs. His orgiastic cycle of escorts and groupies cost his marriage, and he felt unsustained by his loving and caring wife Cynthia, who publicly disapproved of his drug use. On April 13, 1965, the Beatles went into EMI Studio 2 for a 4-hour recording session to create the title song for their next movie, as opposed to their previous recording session on March 30th, which was an attempt to enhance Paul's song That Means a Lot, which ended up being unsuccessful. This time, they were at the top of their game and got right into it. Their whole goal was to master the rhythm track first, then add the vocals as an overdub at a later time. The jangly guitar phrase proved to be a little much for George to perform live, so the group started discussing the possibility of George playing this guitar part as an overdub later. Take 9 turned out to be the best version, but it seems like there was another take that was edited in. You can hear it near the end of the second chorus. Onto this complete rhythm track, overdubbing began. George Martin and the EMI staff got to work, implementing a process that, while novel to the Beatles at the time, would soon become a standard practice for them. In order to create fresh open tracks for additional overdubs, this process necessitated making a tape reduction, often known as bouncing, which involved copying all 4 tracks while mixing those parts into fewer tracks on a new tape. The descending guitar phrases heard throughout the song, as well as the 2 3-note descending guitar lines in each chorus, were recorded by George Harrison on track 4, where he also recorded his lead guitar parts. 5 days later, on April 18th, George Martin and engineers Norman Smith and Phil McDonald entered Room 65 at the Abbey Road EMI complex with the intention of creating both the mono and stereo mixes of Help. But as many Beatle fans would point out, there is a very noticeable difference between the mono and stereo versions of this song as released on record. There are 2 distinctly different Lennon vocals between the two, as well as other subtle differences.
I always liked Walrus, Strawberry Fields, Help, In My Life. Those are some favourites, you know.
Why Help?
Because I meant it. It's real. The lyric is good now as it was then. It's no different, you know. And it makes me feel secure to know that I was that sensible or whatever, you know. That not sensible, but aware of myself then with no acid, no nothing, you know. That's, I mean, well, pot or whatever, that doesn't mean a thing, really. You know? It was just me singing Help and I meant it, you know. I don't like the recording that much. The song I like, you know. We did it too fast to try and be commercial and all that, you know. There's some songs, I like I Want to Hold Your Hand, you know. I might do I Want to Hold Your Hand and Help again, you know. Because I like them, I sing them, you know, the kind of songs I sing.
In 1970, John wanted to record a slower version of Help on the piano sometime after he made this remark. Other than bootlegs, it has never been available to the public. Help is a turning point in John's life since it lyrically captures his suffering. At this point, he acknowledges his need for help and breaks through the emotional armor he had developed since his mother passed away.
Well, because it was 1965. The movie was out of our control. Hard Day's Night we'd pretty much had a lot of input into, and it was semi-realistic. But Help, Dick didn't tell us what it was about, and I realized looking back how advanced it was in a way. It was a precursor to the Batman Pow Wow series on TV and that kind of stuff. Yeah. But he never explained it to us, and partly maybe because we hadn't spent a lot of time together from Hard Day's Night into Help, and partly because by then we were smoking marijuana for breakfast at that period, and we were well into marijuana, and nobody could communicate with us because it was just 4 glazed eyes giggling all the time, you know, in their own world. But we didn't know anything about the movie. The whole Beatle thing was just beyond comprehension. And I was eating and drinking like a pig, and I was fat as a pig, dissatisfied with myself, and subconsciously was crying for help. I think everything that comes out of the songs, even Paul's songs now, which are apparently about nothing, the same way as calligraphy and your handwriting shows everything about yourself. Or Dylan too. Dylan might try to hide in the subterfuge of clever Allen Ginsberg type words or hippie words, but it was always apparent what, if you look below the surface, what is being said. Resentfulness or love or hate, and it's apparent in all work. It's just harder to see when it's written in gobbledygook.